There is a book in a farmhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, that is not for sale at any price. It is not published. It has never been digitized. No library holds a copy. No academic has cataloged it. It is a handwritten record, started by a great-great-grandmother in 1887, continued by every generation since, that contains the accumulated practical knowledge of a family's relationship with their land, their animals, their food systems, their building methods, their plant medicines, and their community. It describes which field grows the best garlic and why. It describes the exact composition of the soil amendment that doubled their wheat yield in 1923. It describes the fermentation culture that has been running continuously since 1891, and what to do when it goes flat. It describes the lime wash ratio that kept their foundation dry through the flood years of 1936. It describes the first frost date their specific microclimate experiences, tracked annually for over a century, which runs 11 days later than the official county average. It describes the herb preparation that their great-grandmother used for lung infections, that the current grandmother still uses, and that has never failed in 4 generations of family memory. That book is worth more than anything on their property, more than the land, more than the house. The knowledge in that book cannot be rebuilt if it is lost. It can only be transmitted, or it disappears. This video is about transmission, about the mechanism the Amish use to ensure knowledge does not die with the people who hold it, and about what happens to knowledge when the mechanism fails, which is the story of how this knowledge was lost from mainstream American life. In 1900, the majority of American households possessed practical knowledge in preserving food, managing soil, and maintaining livestock. How to produce basic medicines from plant materials. How to manage water and heat a building without fossil fuel. In 2024, the majority of American households possess essentially none of this knowledge. The loss occurred between 1940 and 1980. It was accelerated by mechanisms like the redirection of agricultural guidance toward commercial production and purchased inputs. The home economics curriculum was dismantled as the processed food industry lobbied for space, and urbanization removed households from daily practice. The manufactured commodity system made purchasing a substitute for every skill so effectively that the incentive to maintain them disappeared. I want to dwell on the home economics dismantlement specifically because it is the mechanism most directly relevant to what the family book preserves. The history of how it happened reveals the same pattern we have seen in every other video in this series. Home economics as a formal discipline was established in American schools in the late 19th century by women's colleges and the land-grant university system. By 1950, it was present in virtually every secondary school and included substantial instruction in food preservation, nutrition, financial management, and textile production. The knowledge was practical. The purpose was explicit. Every household should be capable of managing its needs without continuous dependence on external commercial services. The processed food industry recognized home economics instruction as a direct competitive threat by the mid-1950s. A household that preserved its own food through fermentation, canning, and drying had significantly reduced need for commercially preserved food products. The industry response was multi-pronged. They funded curriculum development that emphasized convenience foods and modern appliances as the appropriate domain of home management. They provided free teaching materials that positioned commercial products as superior to home production. They lobbied school boards to update curricula. The updates positioned the processed food system as the modern scientific approach and the home production system as the primitive, unsanitary alternative. By 1980, home economics in schools had been reduced to consumer science, teaching students how to purchase and use commercial products rather than produce independently. The knowledge that had been formally transmitted for 80 years was no longer being transmitted. One generation received it, the next did not. The knowledge disappeared within 2 generations of the curriculum change with the speed and completeness that the food industry had intended. The Amish family's book was not affected. It transmits what the school curriculum once transmitted and what the school curriculum stopped transmitting. They never relied on the school curriculum for the transmission of household knowledge. The kitchen table and the barn were always the primary transmission mechanism. The book was always the backup. Both survived the curriculum change that ended the formal transmission of household knowledge for the rest of the country. Both are still operating. The knowledge did not disappear because it became obsolete. It disappeared because the conditions that made it valuable were temporarily replaced. The household's direct relationship with food, water, and health was replaced by an industrial system that made those relationships unnecessary. The key word is temporarily. The industrial system requires continuous material, energy, and financial input, and the operation of a global supply chain that is inherently fragile. When the system fails, the household has nothing to fall back on because the knowledge that would have made the alternative possible was not transmitted. The Amish family in Lancaster County does not have this problem. Their book, started in 1887, has been transmitting knowledge for 137 years. The current generation inherits what their ancestors knew about soil amendments, fermentation culture, plant medicine, and frost dates. They refine and record it. Fine. That is the distinction that matters. The book is not a reference document. It is a practice record of someone who does the thing every year. The garlic field entry describes a specific corner of a field that yields better bulbs and holds moisture longer after rain. No university research station or AI system can produce that document. It is site-specific and relationship-specific in ways general knowledge cannot replicate. Michael Polanyi called this tacit knowledge. The things we know that we cannot fully say. The knowledge that lives in the hands and the body. An experienced farmer knows when soil is ready because his hands have felt it 10,000 times. His body knows what workable feels like. The book creates the conditions under which tacit knowledge develops. It provides the explicit knowledge to start the practice. The book is the map. The practice is the territory. Tacit knowledge is learned by traveling the territory until the map becomes unnecessary. Tacit knowledge is what you learn by living it. Eventually the territory is in your body. Kitabı 137 yıldır koruyan aile, bu uygulamayı da 137 yıldır sürdürüyor. Kitap ve uygulama birbirinden ayrılamaz. Uygulama olmaksızın kitap sadece tarihtir. Kitap olmaksızın uygulama, onu elinde tutan nesille birlikte ölen bir bilgidir. Birlikte, bu sistemleri 200 yıl boyunca dış kesintilere ve kültürel unutulmuşluğa karşı ayakta tutan aktarım mekanizmasıdırlar. Sizin kitabınız da aynı şekilde başlar. Ustalıkla değil, ilk girişle, ilk gözlemle. Aslında ne yaptığınızın ve gerçekte ne olduğunun ilk dürüst kaydıyla. Örtük bilgi uygulamayı takip edecektir. Uygulama kitabı takip edecektir. Kitap bugün başlıyor. Bir sonraki video bu serinin sonuncusu. Söylenecek başka bir şey kalmadığı için değil. İlk videodan beri sakladığım özel bir şey olduğu için. Bu 17 video boyunca anlatılan her aileyi ziyaret ettikten sonra hesapladığım tek bir numara. Amişlerin kendilerinin asla hesaplamadığı bir numara. Çünkü o numaranın ölçtüğü faturaları siz ödüyordunuz. Duyduğunuzda her şey anlam kazanacak. Şimdi size kitapta neler olduğunu anlatayım. Lancaster ve Holmes arşivlerindeki Amişhane kayıtlarında tutarlı bir şekilde görünen bilgi kategorileri. Birinci kategori fenolojik gözlemdir. Yerel çevrede işlerin ne zaman olduğunun kaydı. İlk don, son don. Meyve bahçesindeki ilk arı faaliyeti. Toprak sıcaklığını gösteren belirli bitki türlerinin ilk çıkışı. Onlarca yıl boyunca biriken bu gözlemler, mülk üzerindeki dikim kararları ve hasat zamanlaması için temel oluşturur. Aile kayıtları belirli bir mülkün mikroklimasını temsil eder ve ilçe ortalamasından haftalarca sapabilir. İkinci kategori malzeme performansıdır. Güney duvarındaki güneşe karşı en iyi hangi ahşap dayanır? Geç bahar donlarının olduğu yıllarda hangi elma çeşidi en iyi elma suyunu üretti? Bu, belirli bir yerin uygulamalı malzeme bilimidir. Nesiller boyu süren doğrudan deneylerle kaydedilmiştir. The third category is biological performance. Which cow line has the best conversion of pasture to milk on this particular land? Which seed selection from this year's tomato crop produced the most vigorous plants in the following year, under these specific soil and climate conditions? Which mushroom species fruits most reliably in the specific microclimate of the north side of the barn? Which herb from the garden produces the most consistent results for specific conditions, and in what preparation form and at what dosage? This is the applied biology of a specific place, as detailed and as reliable as any clinical research for the specific conditions it addresses. The fourth category is process knowledge, the exact ratio of lime to sand to straw that produced the best cob for the repair, the exact temperature and timing of the cheese aging process that produced the family's best cheddar in the wet cellar versus the dry cellar, the exact sequence of steps in the fermentation culture revival process when the culture goes flat in the third week of a cold December, the exact sequence of steps in the gravity well maintenance that keeps it clear through iron-rich soil conditions. Process knowledge is the most perishable form of practical knowledge because it exists primarily in the body of the practitioner. It does not survive the practitioner's death unless it is written down in enough detail. The family book writes it down. The fifth category is community knowledge. Who in the community has specific skills that the family does not have? Which neighbor is the best at difficult livestock births? Which family's son is trained in masonry and can advise on foundation work? Which elder woman has the deepest knowledge of plant medicine and should be consulted when standard preparations are not working? The book records not just what the family knows, but who in the community knows what the family does not. These 5 categories constitute the knowledge base that makes every physical system function at the level of refinement demonstrated in Holmes County. The earth tube works better when you know that your specific soil type has a thermal conductivity that differs from the standard assumption. The garden produces better when you know that your specific soil corner runs dark and moist and supports a planting 2 weeks earlier. General knowledge tells you the standard approach. The family book tells you the specific refinement that makes it work optimally on your land. It is the difference between a fermentation culture that works and one refined across 137 years to work better than any commercial product. Now let me tell you how to start your version of this book, because you do not have 137 years. You have today, and today is the beginning of the record that your grandchildren will add to and refine. The book that starts now will be as valuable to the third generation as the 1887 record is to the family that holds it today. The format is simple: a bound notebook, not a digital document, a physical book that can survive power outages and platform changes. It survives corporate bankruptcies and the 100 other ways that digital records fail to transmit across generations. Date every entry. Location every observation. Be specific about quantities, timing, conditions, and outcomes. Do not write what you plan to do. Write what you actually did. Start with the phenological record. Write down today's date and what you observe in your immediate outdoor environment. Is anything blooming? Is the soil workable? Is there frost on the ground? Are bees active? Are specific birds present? These observations reveal your microclimate's pattern. No weather service can provide this because none are observing your specific location on a consistent basis. Now add a soil section. Describe the color, texture, and drainage. Note the earthworm presence. These baseline observations, refined annually, become an invaluable record for future gardeners. Add a seed section. Note the source, planting date, germination rate, and yield. Assess the flavor, texture, and disease resistance in your specific conditions. Across several years, you will identify which varieties are adapting to your environment. This produces the most dramatic long-term return for a family. The Seed Savers Exchange was founded in 1975 after seeds from Bavaria were passed down through generations. They existed only in one man's hands. Without that personal record, those varieties would have disappeared. Today, they maintain over 20,000 varieties in a living seed library. Commercial varieties are bred for broad market appeal and long shelf life. They are not bred for your specific property. They are bred for the average. Your family book begins producing varieties optimized for your land. You cannot purchase this refinement. You can only grow it, record it, and transmit it. The legacy begins in the kitchen, where every harvest is meticulously recorded by hand, linking us to the land. Temperature, salt, and time, details that turn a simple meal into a preserved family tradition for years to come. In the quiet of the drying shed, we gather nature's remedies, continuing a cycle of healing passed down through seasons. Our true medicine cabinet is this book, detailing how the garden's bounty supports the health of every family member. On the land, we observe the rhythms of life, documenting the health of our herds to ensure a sustainable future. We map the strengths of our community, honoring the hands that weave and the tools shared between neighbors. This book is our network, a map of specialized skills and names that hold our shared history together. It sits as a silent witness on the shelf, a physical anchor in an ever-shifting digital world. Over a century of different hands, all contributing to a single coherent story of survival and care. This knowledge never leaves its home. It is the center of gravity for our family's wisdom. Digital worlds flicker and fade, but the written word endures when screens go dark and links are broken. Servers fail, and formats become obsolete, leaving digital history vulnerable to the passage of time. But this 1887 record remains, perfectly readable today, an irreplaceable legacy of honest record and continuous attention. But there is a deeper reason beyond the practical one. A physical book that lives in a specific house on a specific piece of land is itself a form of knowledge. It is the record of a relationship between a family and a place. Moving it, digitizing it, distributing it, abstracting it from its physical context, changes what it is. The Lancaster County Family's Book is not a collection of tips and techniques that could be applied anywhere. It is a record of specific observations of a specific place by specific people over a specific time. That specificity is inseparable from its physical existence in that place. A digital copy of the entries would contain the words, would not contain the knowledge. The knowledge is the relationship. The book is the record of the relationship. The relationship is maintained by the people who live on the land, practice the systems, make the observations, and add the entries. The book without the practice is a historical document. The practice without the book is knowledge that ends with the current generation. Together, they are what has been running in Lancaster County for 137 years. I am not a physical book that lives in a specific house. I am a YouTube channel that requires a platform, an algorithm, a company's continued operation, and your continued subscription to remain accessible. The knowledge in this series will persist as long as those conditions persist. The Lancaster County Family Book will persist as long as the family does. History suggests which of those two persistence mechanisms is more reliable across 137-year timeframes. The knowledge in this series is general knowledge, the best available general knowledge about the systems the Amish maintain. Your family book will eventually make it specific, will adapt the general principle to your specific land, your specific soil, your specific microclimate, your specific community network, your specific biological constitutions, will refine it through your specific practice until it is no longer the knowledge of a YouTube channel, but the knowledge of your family. That refinement is the work of a generation. It begins with a notebook and a date and an honest observation written down before the day ends. Drop in the comments whether you have started any version of this record, even a note on your phone about when your first frost came. That note is the beginning of a phenological record that your grandchildren could use. It is the first entry in the book. It is the decision to transmit rather than to let the knowing stop with you. The Lancaster County Family's Book started with a woman who decided in 1887 that what she knew about her land was worth writing down. She could not have known that 137 years later, 4 generations removed, a family would still be adding to the same record on the same land. She just knew that the knowledge deserved to outlast the knowing. She was right, and you are living in the proof that she was right every time you read about a system that has been running without interruption for 2 centuries. Start the book today. While what you know is still in your hands, and your body, and your memory, and not yet only in the past. The next video is the last in this series, not because there is nothing more to say, because there is something specific I have been saving since the first video that I did not want to say until you had seen everything. A number. A single number that I calculated after visiting every farm and every family described across these 17 videos. A number that the Amish themselves have never calculated, because they were never paying the bills that the number measures. You have been. And when you hear it, everything in this series will make sense. That is the next video. That is where this ends.